In the glittering courts of the Ottoman Empire, where gold gleamed on every wall and silk rustled in endless corridors, another power lurked in the shadows, silent, invisible. Were deadly, not the sword, not the bowstring, but poison. It was the tool of choice when bloodshed could not be seen, when betrayal had to be silenced without a sound. The empire had its assassins, its janissaries, and its spies. But none inspired more fear than the mysterious men and women known as the Zihir Ustalari, the poison masters. Trained in secrets that mixed alchemy with cruelty, they moved quietly between the palace kitchens, the physician's chamber, and even the harem, leaving behind only whispers and untimely deaths. Food in the palace was no ordinary meal. Every dish was prepared under the strictest watch, for the sultan's table was both a place of luxury and a battlefield of survival. To prevent poisoning, imperial tasters sampled each bite before it reached the sultan. And yet, despite these precautions, rumors spread that the poison masters could craft venom so subtle that it revealed itself days later, leaving no trace of its true origin. Some poisons were drawn from rare herbs imported along the Silk Road. Others came from the venom of snakes kept in hidden jars deep within the palace. The most feared of all was bozaziri, a toxin disguised in a sweet, fermented drink which could kill slowly, making it appear as if death had come by fever or exhaustion. It was not always the sultan who was the target. Grand viziers, rival officials, and even princes in the caves were vulnerable to the silent hand of poison. The imperial council was a theater of ambition, and the poison masters were often its hidden stagehands. A cup of sherbet offered during a tense negotiation, or a delicacy sent as a gift, could mean the difference between a man rising to power or being buried in silence the next dawn. Records whisper of a vizier who suddenly collapsed during prayer, his lips stained faintly black. Chroniclers never named the culprit, but in palace corridors, everyone knew it was not Allah's will, but the work of poison. The harem, too, was not immune. Rival concubines fought not only with beauty, but with cunning. A carefully laced perfume, a poison sweet, even a silk pillow dusted with toxic powder. These were the unseen weapons of women competing for the sultan's gaze and their son's claim to the throne. The Valide Sultan, the sultan's mother, often held sway over life and death inside those walls. Many believe she had her own poison masters, trusted eunuchs who carried vials within their robes, ready to defend her influence in a world where power was more fragile than crystal glass. One story, half myth, half truth, speaks of Sultan Ibrahim, called Ibrahim the Mad. His strange behavior had turned the court against him. Some chroniclers claimed his end came not by strangulation, as tradition dictated, as by a slower hand. A bowl of figs, his favorite fruit, was delivered to his chamber. By dawn he was gone. Was it truly the bowstring that ended his reign, or the poisons of the empire's silent masters? History leaves the answer shrouded. The poison masters lived in shadow, their names erased from official records. Yet their presence was undeniable, a ghostly reminder that in the Ottoman world, loyalty could be tested with a sword. But treachery was most often swallowed in a single unsuspecting sip. The poison masters were not only killers, they were students of fear. They knew that sometimes a whisper of poison was more effective than poison itself. Courtiers trembled if a rival sent them food. A glass of water could make a vizier hesitate. Even the thought that a harem concubine had access to secret powders was enough to unsettle the most secure alliances. Poison was not simply a weapon. It was a language, one spoken in dread. Among those who held closest contact with the sultan were the black eunuchs of the harem. Guardians of the sultan's private world, they stood between him and everyone else. Trusted beyond measure, some eunuchs controlled access to the sultan's food, his medicines, and his women. With this power came suspicion. Chroniclers hinted that they too held knowledge of poisons, not as assassins but as protectors or silencers. when threats rose within the palace. It was said the eunuch could slip a drop into a rival's sherbet or remove a dangerous concubine without raising alarm. If the sultan ever feared betrayal, it was often the eunuchs who delivered the antidote, or the poison itself. The art of poison extended beyond the palace walls. In the age of empires, gifts carried both goodwill and danger. Ambassadors exchanged delicacies, perfumes, and wines. To accept them was an honor, but also a gamble. European envoys in Istanbul often brought their own tasters, fearful of Ottoman treachery, while Ottoman ambassadors abroad faced the same silent risks. One Venetian ambassador once confessed in his letters that every bite in Istanbul felt like a prayer. Yet he survived long enough to report the constant paranoia that surrounded the Sultan's court, a place where alliances could be forged in one banquet and destroyed in the next. The chronicles do not always name poison, but the hints remain. A young prince who sickened too suddenly, a vizier whose health crumbled overnight. Even sultans were not beyond suspicion. Murad III, who fathered more than 100 children, was said to have died of natural causes. Yet whispers claimed his end was hastened by those who feared his reckless indulgence. The problem with poison was proof. Unlike the bowstring, it left no spectacle. Unlike exile, it left no return. It erased men quietly, leaving behind only questions. And in those questions, the power of poison grew. Over time, as the empire weakened, the poison masters faded from records. Perhaps their art was absorbed into the shadows of diplomacy, or perhaps their craft became too dangerous even for those in power. Yet their legacy endures in rumor, in the faint stains on history's pages, in a lingering suspicion that no death in the palace was ever truly natural. The poison masters were not simply killers. They were tools of survival in a world where power shifted like sand. Their work reminds us that empires are not always sustained by battles and conquests, but often by silent decisions made in locked chambers, with a single drop that decided the fate of dynasties. The Ottoman Empire's walls were high, its armies vast, its power unmatched. But in the end, sometimes it was not the sword that ended a reign, but the unseen drop in a jeweled chalice.